All right, basic collage video, take two, hopefully now with sound. So our next exercise this week is what we're calling just a basic collage. I should have named it the poster collage because that's kind of what you're making. And it's to take at least 4 photographic images and create a collage from them. So if I click on this example, this is a very old example, but you have these 4 individual photos and they kind of piece them together as a couple different collages. They've got a couple different versions of the title. I expect you all to do a little bit better job than what they did. Frankly, the fact that this one fades out too much with this one over, like there shouldn't be this white band in there, right? Like one should fade to the other. It's not hard to have one fade to the other overlapping properly. But I'm going to show you which tools to use to do this. Before I get to that though, 4 photographic images is the minimum. So we talked before about how, the ambition of the project, you should maybe include a couple more than 4 if you're looking to get that A. And this is about just working with different numbers of layers, opening and closing things in Photoshop, and just kind of getting used to some of these things. Do not use masks. I know some of you know how to use these already. We will learn those later, and they will make this seem like a little brute forcey and a little crude, but most people don't know these yet. So, and you're going to be handing in a PSD file, so I'll know how you built it. I'm going to open up Photoshop, and I actually opened up a JPEG because remember, you can start from a JPEG. So if you've got one that you want to be the background image, you can start from that, or you can go File, New, and start from whatever size you want, because this is something else we have to get used to. There's 2 things we have to get used to. One is getting used to dealing with pixel resolution, right? So if you're choosing something, you need to choose it to be a certain number of pixels high and across and high. There we go. I want it to be landscape. Usually landscape works better, but you can definitely do portrait mode for this as well. And you can choose different sizes to work from. Photo is a good place to start if you're using a preformed one, just because the presets will not bring in any extra guide markers. If you use web or mobile or film, you're going to get extra guides and stuff, and it's going to look different. But the other thing you have to get used to is making some of your own decisions creatively. So sometimes I will spell out it needs to be X, Y, and Z size, and sometimes it'll be up to you whether you want it to be landscape or portrait. All right, so if you open up a JPEG, by the way, you have to click on this little lock to unlock it because JPEGs cannot have layers, but we're going to be working with layers. This will convert to a PSD file pretty quickly. And I want to show you how to use the eraser tool for this, right? Obviously, the eraser tool, you all know what that is. It actually defaults to, there we go, something more like this, right? So it's these sort of harsh, sharp edges, but we want to soften those edges a bit. And so the eraser is a brush. So the paint brush or the brush tool, I kind of hate that that's a misnomer because you can use it for painting, but a brush, the idea of a brush is actually something that's across like several of these tools, and one of them is the eraser. It's set to brush mode. If it's not set to brush mode, you have to put it there. The other ones will not work. And you can click on this little arrow right here next to the size thing, and it'll bring up a whole bunch of settings. Most of these won't be useful for what we're doing today, but this hardness setting, if it's turned all the way up, you can see it cuts an exact, circle, the exact size out of there. And if I zoom in, you can see it's about as sharp as something in Photoshop can get. It's not exactly sharp because there's still a slightly feathered edge on everything to do with the brush, but it's as close as you're going to get to a sharp line. But if we turn the hardness all the way down, we get something very, very different. I'm going to put these right next to each other. Haha. Both sides. So you can see now that the center of what was erased is fully erased. That's what that transparency grid in the back is. But as it goes, you can see the sky shows up more and more and more until it's opaque. And if you look to the height of this one, I tried to line them up as well as I could. So this one ends here, but you can still see there's a ton of erasing that happened down here, or up there, and then on this side as well. I was a little off center, so it's a little off, but basically it's bigger. So as soon as you use something with the sharpness turned off, it's a much wider range. It's kind of like using a spray can. It's going to scatter everywhere. Now you can have the hardness turned up or down depending on how fuzzy you want the line to be, so you can also feather it somewhat and have a little bit of a sharper edge. Now, if we were doing a composite, like something with a sky replacement, like a genuine, hey, we want to make it look like there is actually a different sky back here, then there are very different tools we would use. And we will be learning those in future weeks. But for right now, we just want to get used to having different layers and kind of dealing with pixels, all the drama of pixels, with, having to think about the size of the brush all of a sudden because you got to do it right the first time, because there's an undo button, but there's no like objects here that we can look at. I can't change this outline just by saying, oh, I want it to be less fuzzy. No, I have to go in and erase some from it if I want to do that. All right. The move tool is how you can move things around, and free transform, which is edit, free transform, will allow you to resize something. Holding shift, we're always holding shift, please, so that we can resize properly, and then you hit enter in order to get out of the free transform tool. So the move tool, edit, free transform in order to change things, the eraser tool, and just having multiple images in here and starting to mash them together. So this is kind of just reminding ourselves of how Photoshop works. You all used it in DAT 101, but we need a reminder. The other part of this assignment is looking for images. Now we're going to have a much lengthier video on copyright later, but it is your responsibility to find legal sources. Now for this assignment, you're on your honor. I'm not asking for citations. It's a lot of citation work for something simple like this, and legally you are allowed to use whatever you want. But for my class, as a rule, both for us and the department, frankly, you want stuff that's copy legal, as I call it. So if you go to asset sources down here, oh, sorry, we're under the teacher's view instead of the student. There we go. So it's the bottom one of these things, and it says asset sources. And if I click here, the top one is clip art because we were working with Illustrator earlier, but that's not really what we're doing here. The next 4 down are the ones you want to be looking at. Don't go to archive.org yet. That's an advanced site. Pixabay, Unsplash, and Barn Images. Everything on these sites you can use for class. Literally everything. Everything is legal in such a way that it's okay for class. These are all free for commercial use, even no attribution required, and these sites are all legit. You can see what the license is, all the information's right there. So these are not fly-by-night places. These are real. Each site is a little bit different with its downloads. This one, you have to click here for download. You always have to choose a size. Again, we're getting used to resolutions. If you choose this tiny one, you're going to get a very tiny owl to work with. So consider that, please. Whereas if you get, something that 3,000 by 3,000, that might be too big, right? So we want to choose the right size. And then in the case of this site, there's CAPTCHAs. You can register if you'd like. They just don't want people downloading them en masse. Depends on the site though. And so if I click here, it'll bring up the photo editor. There we go. All right, so that's Pixabay. Unsplash and Barn Images are the same thing. They're also very nice because the author maintains the original copyright. So the stuff is up there for you to use, but the author can still make money off their own image if they would like. Flickr, Flickr is a little bit different. A lot of stuff up here is copyrighted, so we have to look differently. So if I want a picture of, actually let's go with owls. I want a picture of owls. Lots of pictures of owls, right? Well, we can't use all of these. Every time you search on Flickr, you must go to where it says any license, click and say all Creative Commons. That will cover you for this class. And it is a substantial reduction in the amount of images. It's now 66,000 images of owls. That's a lot of owls. But before that, it was 1 million. Which is still probably more than you're going to get from somewhere like Pixabay. So 2000, right? This is why I bring up Flickr. Pixabay is easier to use because literally everything is available to you, but depending on what you're looking for, by size or color or category, etc., like it says 2000 plus, about 30 pages worth. On Flickr, if I go to the Creative Commons license, it's 66,000. That's a lot. It's a lot more, and you can sort by vague color. A cat named Al, cool. So you have to do a little bit of extra work on Flickr, but there's more there. There's more for you to work with. And something like this would be great because the background is nice and even. Oh, nope, that's painting. Nope, nope, nope. We want photographic stuff. It's a little bit of a struggle sometimes. There we go. We want actual photos. One way you can tell on Flickr as well is if it says some rights reserved, you can click on it and it'll tell you Creative Commons. That means you're safe. If it tells you all rights reserved, you can't use it in class. Their download button is over here. You again have to choose the size, but once you choose that, that's it. If you see that there's no download button, well then that's not something you can use, and you need to go back and you need to do your search more proper. If you right click and try to save, you're going to save the HTML file. That's how they lock off people from being able to take the images without permission. People who post their images on Flickr can take away this permission, so don't fight that. That's not right. All right, but those are a couple of locations where you can get images from. We're going to get more into the details and weeds of copyright later, but essentially it's on your honor, and it's your responsibility to start looking. I want to point out that your final is going to be a composite, which is a very complex. It's like a way next step collage, using a lot of images. And you're going to have to find those images somewhere. And if you're not paying attention to it now and you start finding copyright images later, for that final, you're going to have to redo your final, and I've had people had to do that before. All right, but at least 4 images, photographic images. If you add stuff after the 4, that's maybe more clip arty or text or things like that, that's perfectly acceptable. The type tool in Photoshop is like every other type tool, including the one in Illustrator. It's very tiny right now. Because this is a very large picture. There we go. That's a little bit better. So, but it works the same. The properties come up over here. There's all your, please don't use Times New Roman or Papyrus or Comic Sans if you're using type. But otherwise, you should be good to go. And again, save as a PSD file. Do not export a JPEG or anything like that. That's no good. Got to save a PSD file. I need to see your work. And remember that when you go to upload both these files for week 5 submissions, it's going to take a little bit longer because it's going to it has to upload things to the server. All right.